In this episode, we're going to talk to Kemp, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you approach designing a site, how you actually work with getting the audience into the area that you really want and move around. So, welcome. So, Chris, what is the first thing you have to look at when you design a site?
Well, if you'd asked me that question, say, nearly 20 years ago when I first came here, I would have a completely different answer. Because I would have been focused on safety from the start of the festival and look at it from that point of view. But what I'd probably now look at is what you want the customer journey to be for the type of customer who's coming. Because over the years, what I've seen is I've seen site design fail because it hasn't taken into consideration the needs of the customer and the changing kind of social and psychological elements, as well as the kind of health and safety elements linked to where a crowd goes, when it gets pretty dangerous, when it doesn't, pinch points, all those kind of things. So I think now I'd start with nothing on the site and look at where you want your crowd to go, given the number of stages, the different activities you wanted on that site, how they were going to join up, what the movement is between them, are there any gaps, are there any places where it's too small to get through, and if there are, how are you going to mitigate that sort of thing? So it's really starting from a blank sheet and looking around at any structures that are not normally there, and then building from that, and then identifying where those structures are best to go, putting them in place, and then making sure that the crowd will come in the way you want them to. Looking at your transport elements, so what's your transport share from different places, and how's that going to impact on how the crowd comes in? So all of those different things, and then start to design the site after you've got all that information that you need.
You're working at the Formula 1 in Silverstone.
Yeah.
So you're talking about put the elements in that are not normally there, but isn't that different because that is already normally there? Everything is normally there, more or less, right?
No, not everything. All that's normally there are the grandstands and the track and anything that is hardwired in. So all of the kind of villages, the food villages, the fence is as it is at this moment. Yeah. But with that fence, you can move it if you spend a whole year trying to govern and organize local governments, local authorities, highways. You can build new roads. You can put bridges over places where you need them. So most things are movable. The only thing that's not really movable is once you put the grandstands in, you cannot move them. But if you want a road change, you change the road. You pay for it, you change it.
Yeah.
So all of those kind of things, a large amount of money is spent on. So for instance, if there's a new system comes in, you've got a new rail system that has a drop point, which they haven't got around there at the moment. But if they had, they would put a new system in to get those people there. Not a bus system, but somewhere where people could drive or park and ride to make that happen. So the shift in what's happened is by people normally parking. More and more people have come by public transport, park and ride, camp there. So it's changed over the years, it's changed the whole aspect of how the Grand Prix works. And the only reason that's worked is because they've totally kept the customer and what the customer wants in their head. The only thing they can't do, because it's impossible, is to park the people who want to park nearest to their entrances that they've got tickets for, because it's not physically possible, because things change. You cannot get car parks that big in those areas. So you have to move some people away. So a lot of people then camp, because if they're camping, you can get to the car park of the campsite. Therefore, you know where you're going to be and you find your way through the post.
You've worked at quite a lot of events around the world. What is the hardest event you've worked at in crowd flow?
It's a really difficult one. I think the hardest event was probably in the US, and it was New West Fest. And the reason the crowd flow was difficult was because 120, 130,000 people a day came, but there was no where they couldn't go because it was a free festival. Yeah?
Yeah.
But you had to get, if you wanted tickets for the main site, you had to send away for them. If you wanted tickets for various other areas, you had to do that. So therefore, you knew that there wasn't going to be enough space for everybody to see the band, because the main stage only had a 6,500 capacity area for those people to get into. So if it's only 6,500, then where are the other 114,000 people going to go?
Yeah.
So big screens were put up. It was mitigated a lot by that. There was fairgrounds for children, huge amounts of things you could buy, different elements, a whole area with restaurants. And you could walk in and out. There were no gates, so you just could walk in and out. The only things it did have is very high HVM, because that stopped vehicles coming into the place and causing havoc. Yeah. So that whole thing. And the other thing about it is you couldn't spend any money. You had festival dollars. So what you did was you had to cash in at the beginning and get your festival dollars. But once you bought them, you couldn't cash them back out again.
Yeah.
So that was on the site.
Yeah, that's how you make money.
It is.
I've been to those kinds of events. So, but what is, if you should say that there are three things when we want to recreate our site here. So let's say we want to move a stage. The three most important things that we start looking at before we move the stage. We already have the site, but I need to change something.
Okay, the first thing is, are you moving to that stage that's close to another stage or close to another area that you're using? The second thing is, if you've got a timetable that schedules things close together, have you got something where there's going to be an overspill of noise? And the other thing with that is, when you have a crowds coming towards it, are there other crowds moving in different directions at that time, which could call pinch points, choke points, all sorts of different things, which may enable it not to kind of work as it should work. And I think those three things really are crucial, and they're basic. They're right at the beginning of what you do. I suppose there's other things like, have you got the infrastructure to facilitate that stage being where it is? Can you move things? Has it got the right power? You know, all those kind of things. But that, again, like Silverstone, can be quite easily done if you do it with enough time. So if you haven't got time, those are massive problems. But if you have got time and you work it out well in advance, like I know you do here, then you will know exactly what those challenges are. And it's one of the reasons people like me come down here, is to look at those things to see if what you predict is actually what's taking place. And if it's not, what are the changes that need to be made to those to make that happen? And I think one of the key things with this is about the tolerance, the risk tolerance of yourselves, and also the risk tolerance of people who come. Are they willing to go in places that don't just seem quite right? And are you willing to take that chance that you'll create something that people won't go to? So that kind of double risk tolerance is really important.
Yeah, this is a normal discussion for us here, because I really love wide boulevards.
Yeah.
But the designers doesn't really like it. They want narrow things. And they're actually claiming that when they create narrow roads, people look up, because you need to look where you're walking, or if you're walking into somebody. And if you look up, you interact with other people. So just designing it changes the whole environment. So if design changes the environment, how much influence does culture and the culture of the audience really affect the site design, and the other way around?
Well, think if you take something like, if you take music culture, for instance, to start off with. If you take something like rock and metal, then rock and metal is a self-regulating community. So whatever you do for rock and metal, they will adapt to, because it's about that community being together and developing what they're doing, because it's not just about the artists, it's about their behaviors, what they can do. Other people may class these as antisocial, but actually they're very social behaviors. And they're things where they can get together. I mean, I used to be, or still am, a heavy metal fan, and we were all termed as misfits because we didn't fit into any kind of category. So people like to put the misfits all together. And to me, that's great, because what you're doing is you're putting people of a like mind to have a great time in a great space. Hence why it's such a vibrant culture, why so much takes place. Now, if you take rap, Kendrick Lamar last night, if you take kind of that Afro beats, and grime. What you've got there is you've got a culture that sometimes the audience understand, but those managing the audience don't understand. And by not understanding it, it becomes confrontational, where actually it's not confrontation at all. It's culture that's not understood. I mean, I've been in the middle of a massive arena where everything's been kicking off and looked around me and thought, this crowd is loving this. But nobody here really understands about that culture. They need to learn it. They need to think about it and then put that into their staff training package so that people think, oh, right, I see what's going on. This isn't something that's dangerous. It's something that's okay. Same with punk. That happened with punk. Pogoing, people diving off the stage, all sorts of things. This was a real problem, but it wasn't. It was people having fun. And as soon as people got to understand the kind of idiosyncratic nature of it, you could stand back and let it happen and only step in when it needed to be made more safe.
Yeah, and this is where the challenge comes. For some people it feels safe, for other people it doesn't.
Yes.
So that's the challenge. If you want to go into the open area in city designs, I've done a lot of shows in city squares, city centers, massive shows. I know that you have done some as well. What is the largest show that you have done?
Well, that was the one in the US. Well, apart from the Pope's visit to...
Oh, that's mild Pope. That small one.
Pope's visit to Romania, which was a pretty large one.
Yeah, pretty large one.
Yeah.
With how many visitors?
To tell you the truth, I cannot remember.
And nobody knows.
No.
Because how do you calculate how many people are in an area?
Well, it was in a city park, and there were supposed to be ways in, but there were other ways to get into that.
Yeah.
And people would find them,
Yeah.
But you're right, calculating those things. I mean, I remember when I was a child going to see Sunderland come back with the FA Cup into Sunderland City Centre, and they said there was 500,000 people there. And there was no crushing, but they were all over the place, and there must have been 200,000 or 300,000. But because of the space and the way the space was used, even in those days, in 1973, there was still room for everybody to get in.
Yeah, but I think when you are building a festival, there's an understanding that it's used differently than when you're in a normal city doing an event. Can city developers, regular city developers, create a proper festival?
I think they can create a proper city festival, because I think more and more developers are trying to understand how people behave in them. I mean, I've looked at some research that focuses directly on how people move around cities and why they move around city. So having an impulse of why you need to go somewhere and why you need to watch something. Take in London, when they go down towards Buckingham Palace. People congregate there, they know what it's for. There's a reason for going there. They're put into a specific place. They know how to manage it because they do it pretty often. At a funeral, a wedding, or a christening, So those kind of things, the person who runs that security and crowd management area has done that for the last 20, 30 years and knows it inside out. So it's just calculating how many people will actually be there and what are the new ways that people are going to try and get in to the area where this is on, if they don't have a ticket or if they're not supposed to be in that area.
Yeah. All right, Chris, thank you very much. Pleasure having you. Enjoy the festival.
Thank you. Nice to see you as well.
And you.
Take care.